So it's a family heirloom now.
Okay, so we're going to talk about polity of the church. Let me go ahead and give you some handouts. And if you want that, and pass these, take one down and pass them around. Hopefully I've got enough of these.
You're gonna have so
I
much
had
paper.
had to update that one. No, the next one I had to update.
There are 5 states inside of Texas.
No, hang on. There are 5 dioceses in Texas.
That makes no sense.
This still had deaneries on it, so I had to change it to neighborhoods.
Who are the people in your neighborhood?
Okay, so we are the Episcopal Church is part of the worldwide Anglican Communion because this church was formed out of the Church of England. And so we're going to start off by talking about the worldwide Anglican Communion. So wherever the British Empire went, or then eventually the Episcopal Church went in missionary trips, that formed the worldwide Anglican Communion. The Archbishop of Canterbury he's first among peers. He has no real authority outside the Church of England. Now, there are other archbishops. There's an Archbishop of York, and I'm thinking there's another 1 or 2 other archbishops. But when we get into church history, you'll see why the Archbishop of Canterbury is the top bishop in the Church of England. Archbishops or archbishop and bishops of England, they're appointed by the monarch, or they're approved. You know, the bishops or the archbishop may recommend somebody to be a bishop, but Queen Elizabeth has to put her blessing on it for that to happen. If there's somebody she doesn't like, for some reason, they don't become bishop. Whereas here, we elect bishops. We go through an election process for bishops. Okay, there are these, within the Anglican Communion, there are 4 instruments of communion. The first one is the Archbishop, and he is the spiritua leader. This is Latin, I think. I'm just kidding. And his name is Justin Welby right now. That's who the Archbishop of Canterbury is. And remember, he's the spiritual leader, but he's not like the Pope. The Pope says, do something, and all the churches in the Roman Catholic churches in the world, they have to do whatever he says. The second instrument is a meeting called the Lambeth Conference, and it takes place every 10 years, and the first conference was in 1867. And this is a meeting of all the archbishops and all of the bishops in the worldwide Anglican Communion. They get together every 10 years, and they discuss various things. They can recommend things, but again, they really don't have a whole lot of power either, other than just being collegiality with each other. The third instrument is the Anglican Consultative Council. It was created in 1968, and they first met in 1971, and they meet every 3 years. Down here, they're bullies and hand slappers. They're kind of looking for more power. This is the group that does not like what's been going on in the Episcopal Church in America, in the United States, and in Canada. And so they're trying to make it so that they and the Bishop of Canterbury have the power to punish other churches in the Anglican Communion or kick the United States and Canada out of the Communion, but that hasn't happened so far. Then the fourth element are primates, not primates as in apes, but primates. They have a meeting for they first met in 1979, and this is archbishops, primates, and presiding bishops. I don't know if there's other presiding bishops other than the United States has a presiding bishop, and we'll get into that. But yeah, so that's kind of the really head mucky mucks that meet for that. But then within the worldwide Anglican Communion, there's what's called provinces. And every Sunday we pray for a diocese or a province in the Anglican Communion. And that first bit of paper that I have there that says Provincial Directory, that shows you all of the different provinces. Now, within a province, there might be multiple dioceses or even multiple nations. So like a province of Indonesia might encompass several island nations that are in Indonesia. The TEC, or the Episcopal Church, is one province, but even the Episcopal Church is worldwide. And so it used to be that not that long ago that we called ourselves ECUSA, the Episcopal Church in the United States of America. But the problem with that is that we're not just the Episcopal Church in the United States of America. If you look at this map here, this shows you that all of the different green colors are provinces within. So see, there's provinces within the worldwide Anglican Communion, but there's provinces within, or regions within, the Episcopal Church. And you notice there's a province in Latin America that takes in about 4 countries. Puerto Rico is its own province. United States Virgin Islands is its own province. Europe there are actually American Episcopal churches in Europe. And I don't know, Don and Bree Sobeck. They lived in Paris for a number of years, and Breeze did the flowers in the cathedral, the American Episcopal Cathedral in Paris. And then you notice that Haiti is its own province, and we pray for a school in Haiti every Sunday. So, and I think there's other ones in other parts of the world even. So, one of the things is, so in the Episcopal Church, we have a presiding bishop, and he's elected. He serves for a 9-year term. And right now, our presiding bishop is, you at least ought to know his first name if you listen to the prayers of the people. Beth?
Michael.
Michael, what's his last name for
Curry.
bonus point? Michael Curry.
I knew the last name.
And so, but then most of the other provinces or dioceses, whatever, they have archbishops or primates. Primate being prime, meaning head of whatever. Also the difference is that archbishops and primates in other provinces have what I call dictatorial power. They're kind of like the Pope in a sense. They say do something, and the churches absolutely have to do it. Whereas in the Episcopal Church, the presiding bishop, he presides. He's a presider or chair, like a chair of a committee, over the House of Bishops, over the General Convention, and he represents the Episcopal Church in the Anglican Communion. So when the archbishops and the primates or Lambeth Conference, all those things, Michael Curry goes and represents us, the Episcopal Church. The other thing is that in these other provinces in the Anglican Worldwide Communion, that they oftentimes will meet every year or every 2 years or something. So they can like draft legislation or they can make rules like that. But in our church, we have a convention every 3 years, and that's when we make decisions. So part of the conflict that we have in the Anglican Communion is these other dioceses, provinces, they want us to do something or make a change, but it can, we have to wait until the next. So say for instance, we just finished a general convention. Then one of these provinces says, well, we don't like what you did in that general convention and we want you to change it. Well, we can't just say, okay, we're going to meet again and change it. It takes another 3 years before we meet again to make that change. Okay. So then there are Anglican churches in the United States. And most of these, they're breakaway churches from the Episcopal Church. Back when the 1979 prayer book was introduced, there were groups that didn't like it, and so they broke off, and they were still using the 1928 prayer book or even, the English prayer book. They didn't like the fact that women became priests, and they have issues with the LGBTQ and same-sex marriage issues. So they broke away from the Episcopal Church. And they have aligned themselves with churches and archbishops in both South America and in Africa. And then in some instances, these bishops, archbishops, primates in South America and Africa have made Anglican bishops in the United States. Or they've sent bishops from South America and Africa to do business here.
We have an Anglican church in Evansville.
2 of them. There's Trinity Anglican Church, which has a website and everything. Then there's also St. Andrew's Anglican Church, but I couldn't find a whole lot of information on that. But if you look up on the website for Trinity Anglican Church, they call themselves the Reformed Episcopal Church, and they say that they're the traditional. So that's kind of a slap in the face to us because we call ourselves traditional and we call ourselves Reformed, but just because they don't like some of the things that we do, they think that we're bad and they're good. And there was before I came in 2003, the Episcopal Church consecrated its first openly gay bishop. And the priest that was here at the time let all the other churches know that he was against that, and anybody who didn't agree with that, they could come to St. John's, and this would be a place where that was not going to be allowed or whatever.
And that almost caused it.
And so there was this group of people that came to St. John's who clashed with the people who were already here, and then eventually they were politely asked to leave, and they formed the Anglican Church in Evansville.
Here we actually had a couple of people who were longtime members stand up and say, well, if you don't, they actually asked them to leave. They stood up in church and asked them to leave. Wasn't very pleasant.
And then one of the things that made St. John's Church mad was when this Anglican Church broke off and formed their own church, they threw up a website, and guess who they had on their website as their priest? The priest that was here, who was supposed to be here. At the time. Oops. So that priest was politely asked to leave St. John's. And the bishop was happy. Bishop Kate was happy to see him go. Okay, so this is where we get into our little diagrams here, and this is the Episcopal Church. So we left off with we have general conventions. General conventions take place every 3 years, and the General Convention consists of the House of Bishops and the House of Deputies. And obviously the bishops are bishops, and the deputies, though, are clergy and lay people elected from each diocese. Not only in the diocese in the 50 states, but the diocese in these other provinces, other areas of the world. There's actually the United States has not had formal relations with Cuba since the 1950s, but at the last convention they invited, but there's still an Episcopal Church in Cuba. So we finally invited the church in Cuba to come back into communion with the American church. And so we, in our diocese convention, we elect deputies. There's something like 4 or 5 different deputies, clergy and lay people, and then there's a bunch of alternates too, so if somebody can't make it. And they move the General Convention around the various cities throughout. I know in like the 1980s it was in Indianapolis, and then about 10 years ago, I think it was or 9 years ago, it was in Indianapolis again. So the presiding bishop is kind of the leader and sits over, he's kind of the chair of the General Convention. And then under all of these is what's called an executive council. And
Do you have a question?
Go ahead.
So is the presiding bishop kind of like the Pope? Like the presiding bishop is like the head of all of these bishops?
He is like the chair of a committee. He doesn't have any more. He has one vote in the House of Bishops. So if the House of Bishops meets and they want to vote on something, a resolution or something, he gets one vote. All the bishops get one vote.
We have nothing like a pope.
Yeah, nothing like a pope. He's kind of the spiritual leader and the representative and head of, but he has spiritual power and spiritual influence, but not.
And he's only elected for 9 years?
9 years.
All right.
And
And
they're
the Pope is
actually-
elected for life.
They're actually getting ready to, unless the Pope wants to resign. Benedict resigned.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, they're getting ready to put together a nominating committee for the next presiding bishop. So I don't remember. So, I mean, it's got to be coming up within like the next couple of years or so.
I think so.
So then there's this, within the larger Episcopal Church, there's an executive council, and they are about the business of the church. And then they can also elect committees, commissions, agencies, boards, task force made up of clergy and lay members appointed by the president of the House of Bishops, of deputies, but they don't have to be deputies here. They can be appointed to serve on these. And so a general convention takes place, and they say, over the next 3 years or long, we're going to have these resolutions, and we're going to do this business. Okay? And so they put together these committees and task force and so on to do the work that is voted upon during the general convention.
Your question, I think, will be answered in his next segment as far as the Pope when we get into the church history.
Yeah. Okay, and then we talked about the General Convention, or the Executive Council also takes advice from the provinces, and the provinces, which, are these different color areas. I don't know, I can't remember what province we're in.
We're in the 5th province.
Yeah, okay. So this is our province, and all these, like you see, look at the state of Indiana, that it's got this squiggly line. So there's actually, there's 2 dioceses in Indiana. There's the Diocese of Indianapolis and the Diocese of Northern Indiana. In Ohio, there's the Diocese of Southern Ohio, and then there's the Diocese of Ohio, which is the northern part. And then, but then you see out in these big, wide open states that there's no diocese. See this one circular one there that's kind of funky, that stands out? That is the Diocese of the Navajo lands. So that encompasses a lot of Indian reservation. They have their own diocese. And yeah, and so some of the states are their own dioceses, and some states are split up. But like Texas, you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 dioceses in Texas.
New York has a lot of dioceses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. New York has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least, maybe 8. But you got to remember that this area up here is more densely populated. So there's more people and more churches. Okay, then the diocesan convention, which is our all diocese conventions, they're connected to the general convention, through the deputies that they elect and or people that they elect to the synods. So we not only elect people for the general convention, but we can also appoint people to work in our province, and our province meets at various times. So then now that moves us down into our diocese and how we are governed. So you see off here to the side in the yellow what I just said, that General Convention deputies, they also are representatives to synod representatives. So whenever the synods meet, they meet as well. So we have a bishop, but then we also have kind of like you have the House of Bishops and you have the House of so here, the clergy and lay delegates, they are, in a sense, separated. So if there was going to be a change to the canons of the Episcopal Church,
or changes to the constitution of the diocese, we would vote by order. So the clergy would vote and the lay delegates would vote separately. And you have to have a majority of both houses for that to pass. We have over here, we used to have what's called deaneries, but now they're called neighborhoods. And this map over here is a little old because it still talks about the deaneries. And Beck put this together many, many, many years ago. But we are down here, Mount Vernon. So all of these churches, we're still in our own neighborhood. So this is called now the Confluence neighborhood. Used to be the Southwest Deanery. Then you've got a bunch of churches up here in this area and that are in their own deanery neighborhood now. I think Bedford might be in like a centrally located neighborhood now. There are three churches, three big churches in Indianapolis that have a lot of influence and money. The Cathedral, which is on the circle at 30th and Meridian Street, is Trinity Episcopal Church, and then St. Paul's Episcopal Church is up around 56th Street. And originally they wanted those three churches to be split off into different deaneries, but I think they're now all together again in one deanery or in one neighborhood. I could be wrong about that. But then there's the northeast area up here, has various churches. The southeast has their various churches, and these all have funky names. The only one that I remember is ours, which is the Confluence, because it's where the confluence of where the Ohio
and he used to be in
Wabash.
charge of it, but he's not in charge of it anymore.
Yay. Well, we'll get to that. Because there used to be called the Dean of the Deanery, and I was the Dean of the Deanery, but now they're called co-conveners, and they have, the co-conveners are one clergy person and one lay person. The clergy person that's the co-convener right now is the priest at St. Paul's Evansville, Holly Zare. And guess who the lay co-convener is?
Take a wild guess.
Because she loves the power and the glory. But within the neighborhoods, the clericus or the priests, we have Zoom meetings once a month. Then you have the wardens of the church. They're supposed to attend neighborhood meetings, and then people that are elected as delegates and or alternates to convention. So once a year, the last Sunday in January, we, St. John's, we get together and we have a parish annual meeting. And at that meeting, we elect two people, because of the size of our church, we elect two people to be delegates, lay delegates to the diocesan convention. And I think, are you one coming up?
I am, because just odd circumstances. I don't know why I am.
Okay.
You always are.
What? No, I'm not always. It's turned out because...
I try not to let her be.
No, he doesn't want me to be, but because somebody was sick and somebody couldn't go, and then it was a Zoom meeting, and he doesn't want me to be.
I just don't want, I don't want there to be convention junkies.
Better you than me.
You should go sometime, they're fun.
They are fun.
Okay, so moving on. In the Episcopal Church, each diocese has to have a standing committee, and it also has to have a commission on ministry. The standing committee is in charge of all of the real estate and financial stuff in the diocese, and also they're in charge if Bishop Jennifer were to die or resign, it would be the standing committee that would put together the nominating committee for the next bishop. The Commission on Ministry they're in charge of ordinations, of making sure that candidates, somebody that wants to be ordained to the diaconate or to the priesthood are worthy. The standing committee has some say in that as well. The executive council is similar to the executive council up here. I spent 6 years on executive council, and it takes whatever resolutions come out of the General Convention or the Diocesan Convention, and they work on the business of the diocese. So, one of the things that the General Convention does, from the very beginning, it's had what's called Constitution and Canons. And something that is in the Constitution is that we will always have an authorized Book of Common Prayer. And so things that are in the Constitution, they have to be changed. It takes 2 votes in General Convention. So it would take 6 years. So if somebody tomorrow said we have a new prayer book, it would have to be voted at 2 different conventions for it to pass. The canons, to change those in the Episcopal Church, it only has to pass 1 convention. The General Convention, remember, meets every 3 years. They also put together countless different resolutions on different things. And then they pass that information down to the diocese. And then the Episcopal Diocese of Indianapolis, it has its own constitution and canons. But we meet every year instead of 3 years. So if we want to change something in the diocesan constitution, it has to pass 2 votes. So if we voted on a change this year, then we would have to vote on it and approve it again the next year for it to change. Something that's in the canons can just be changed in 1 vote. Then also resolutions that come out of here can also be passed down here, but there can also be resolutions. So a resolution that we really didn't follow through on was that every church in the diocese will have Narcan in their parish. Do you guys know what Narcan is? Okay, so when somebody overdoses on like heroin or something like that, there's this drug called Narcan that you can like jab it right into their chest. The drug goes in and it kind of like brings them back. It's kind of like snake anti-venom. It brings them, hopefully will bring them back to life. So that resolution says that every parish should have it. We haven't done it yet because we've got a fire station that's like 3 blocks away that we could call. There's been other resolutions that we've done, some we don't. Canons and Constitution are the laws. If they make a change to the Constitution and canons, we have to do it. If they make a resolution, we can say, yeah, we like it, no, we don't. And then, as I said, St. John's Episcopal Church, we have a constitution and bylaws. And for your reading pleasure, here is a copy. And these get changed every so often. Now, in our parish constitution, if we want to make a change to our constitution, we have to announce it for about a month. We have to say to the congregation, we're going to have this meeting, we're going to change our constitution to say this. we're going to go from this to this. Then we have a meeting of the whole congregation and we take a vote on whether or not we want to make the change to the Constitution. On the bylaws, that can be done by the vestry. The vestry can make changes to the bylaws, and we have made a number of different changes to the bylaws in the time that I've been here. One of the changes that we made to the bylaws, I think, or it might have been to the Constitution, was voting. When I first came, we had 9 people on vestry, but since we've kind of lost some membership, it's kind of hard to get 9 people. So we said no less than 7 people. So we really went from 9 to 7. So that was a change that we made. But here's the other thing about these, is that if the Episcopal Church makes a change to the Constitution and canons, that change has to be made by the Diocese of Indianapolis, and in some instances that change has to be made by us. That if we cannot, in our Constitution and bylaws, we cannot put anything in here that contradicts the Constitution and canons of the diocese, or constitutes or is in conflict with the Constitution of the Episcopal Church. And one of the things that has kind of been a sore spot in those churches that have left is, and we're talking really old churches that have broken away, that they've wanted to take their property, they've wanted to keep their churches. And in some instances, the courts have said, yes, you can keep your property. And in other ones, it says, no, you can't keep your property. And one of the things in our church bylaws is that it says that everything that we own in this church, the church building, and I say paper clips, pencils, everything that we have that's property of this church belongs to the Diocese of Indianapolis and belongs to the Episcopal Church. So we can't change this and say that we own everything, that St. John's owns everything, because that would contradict the Episcopal Church and the diocese that say that all property of parishes and churches is held in trust to these other entities.
And some people don't like that idea.
Okay, so what does all this have to do with you? You will be eventually considered adult confirmands, and you will be confirmed adults at age 16 when you are confirmed, and if you are communicant in good standing, meaning you come to church on a fairly regular basis, that you can then serve on the vestry. Even at 16 years old, you can serve on the vestry. You can be a neighborhood co-convener. So if you want to kick Beth out of her position and you want to be nominated and elected to be a co-convener of the neighborhood.
And go to meetings?
And go to meetings, which are usually Zoom meetings now, you can do that. You could be nominated as a delegate to the diocesan convention. So if you were tired of Beth going to the convention every year, you could volunteer to be a delegate to convention, and we could vote you in to do that.
I thought she already had her name glittered on it to a chair and everything.
Glittered on a chair.
Isn't it like technically like her name on it? So no, I wouldn't want to deprive you of that position.
I'm just saying, if you want to have your chair, your
name glittered on the chair. They would love to have youth delegates.
You could also, they would like to have youth.
And you really don't need to be 16 to go to.
You don't have to be 16 to go to convention, but if to be elected, for any of these.
To vote, you have to be
And
16.
You have to be
but-
16 and you have to be confirmed. So you could actually put your name in nomination for any of the standing committee, executive committee, commission on ministry, and any other, committee that there is in the diocese. Beth and I were on this one, have been off and on this committee called the disciplinary board, which if I were to do something against the canons and constitution or something, somebody would bring charges up against me for some weird reason, my case would be heard by the bishop and then maybe go to the disciplinary board like a trial. I'd be put on trial.
Like the bishop in the diocese where I came from, he was put on the disciplinary board of all the bishops, and he was taken away from being a bishop.
Yeah, the bishops have their own, priests have their own disciplinary board, but the bishops have their own disciplinary
And they
board.
took him away from being a bishop because of his stance on marriage, same-sex marriage, and he refused to marry same-sex people. And so all the bishops got together and said, okay, you're not abiding by our rules of the Episcopal Church. So they took away his bishopric, and,
Yeah.
and Bishop Kate was on his disciplinary committee.
So disciplinary committees are like courts.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could put yourself in nomination to be a general convention deputy or then be a synod representative. Now, if you want to be ordained to become a deacon or to become a priest, would have to be confirmed, and there's a whole big process. But you could become a deacon at age 23, and you could become a priest at age 24. So if you have that in your brain and you're thinking about it, the first thing you need to do if you want to become a deacon or a priest is to talk to me.
Talk to your rector. Uh-oh, he's got to stop talking. He has no more paper.
So there you go.